Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I appreciate that a whole lot. I also love when people leave comments, so if you have a question about this video, or you have a suggestion for another video, or you just want to tell me how you do things, those things are all great to hear. Or even just say hi, that's nice as well. So today I'm going to make a bracelet. I made a ring last Saturday and people seem to like that one, but I'm kind of in the mood to make a bracelet today, so I'm going to make a little kind of cuff. And I was looking through old Art Nouveau stuff from the turn of the century, and I saw something. It wasn't a cuff, it was more of a bangle, but it had some cool kind of viney looking stuff on it with 3 stones. So this is going to be similar to that. It looked like the one I was looking at was made out of brass or something like that, because it was definitely not gold. But it was kind of goldish colored. But I think it'll make for a really cool piece in silver. So I'm going to try and kind of model this based off of that, although it's going to be quite a bit different. So I picked out 3 dark green tourmaline cabs, about 6 millimeters, and I think they'll be great for the theme that this one has. And it's got kind of like mushroomy looking heads on it and stuff, so I've figured out a way to make those, and we'll do that. Before we get started on this though, I wanted to thank some groups of people. First off, my patrons, who are my core group of supporters. I love that you've signed up for my Patreon. I appreciate your support, and I think you're a great group of people. I really like interacting with you over there. And I have a new one whose handle is In Crisis, which is a good handle. I think many of us are in crisis a lot. So thanks for joining up. I think you'll find that that's a great group of people over there. The other group is my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 21,100, I believe. That's amazing. Thank you for that. And I really love the comments that you leave, especially the ones where you tell me that you've gotten something out of my videos, or it's helped you to pull out of a slump, or things like that are really moving to me and helpful as a teacher. So thanks for letting me know that I'm helping. I also do appreciate the super thanks and the buy me a coffees. Those really help to keep me afloat during the kind of harsh economic times that we're in right now. So thanks for that. All right, well, let's get started on this project. All right, so this is one of my design idea sketchbooks, which you can get on my merch store. I find them pretty useful. On the newer ones, I put some different charts on the backs of them. This one has wire gauge to inches to millimeters, which I think is handy for a lot of people. I know I've converted to mostly the metric system anymore, but I still fall back into that because that's how I was taught. What I like about these, though, is that they have this grid background, which allows you to sketch out your designs a little bit more symmetrically. At least it does for me. I'm not super good at that. This is going to be what we're going to do today. Let me show you a little bit of what I did in advance to kind of see how it was going to look. Well, I picked out these little tourmaline cabs. They're all pretty dark green because I thought if we're doing kind of mushroomy head stuff, I think of like mosses and kind of wet forest land. And so I thought the deep green of these were sort of moss reminiscent, but we'll be putting one there, one over here, and one over here. And I made some of these as little kind of tests, see how they look, and I think they'll be good. So what I used some 6 gauge half round, which is 4.1 I think millimeters, and I soldered it. Well, actually, I shaped the head into kind of a bullet shape, and then I textured it with my with the edge of my chasing hammer to give it some kind of lines and character. And then I soldered on a piece of 14 gauge round and flattened it out a little bit and twisted it. So I think that'll work pretty well to make our little viney parts. Part of it in here is going to be a little bit bigger, it looks like, from my drawing. So that's going to be, I think I was originally going to use 8 gauge and just file it down into a taper. I have some little 10 gauge stuff too. I might use a piece of that. And then where it thins out enough, like over here, I'll taper it and hook it into some of this more 14 gauge round, which again, I'll probably do some flattening of parts of it to make it kind of not all the same width. And then we'll start piecing it together. But before we do that, we're going to make the band, I think, which is going to be 8 gauge half round, which is 3.25 millimeters. 14 gauge round, by the way, is 1.6 millimeters. And the bezels, I made 2 of the bezels already, so I'd have those out of the way, and I'll make 1 in front of you, just for time's sake. And let's see, the bezel material I'm using is 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, which equates to 4.76 millimeters. And the thickness is 0.41 millimeters, or 26 gauge. So the bottom, I'm not putting a bottom, I'm putting a step on there made out of 18 gauge round that I just solder a little ring in there, and I'll show you how to do that in a bit. But let's get started on the band first, and we'll do the overall thing. This is 6 inches exactly, which is a pretty good size for a cuff. If it seems too long when I'm done, I can always snip it off a little bit shorter, especially with this kind of a design. So I cut 2 pieces about, I think it was about 6.5 inches long to compensate for, spreading them out like that. That'll reduce the length slightly. And that should be about right. So our first step is going to be I already found the center of these. We need to figure out how far out these start to curve back like that, though. So we'll measure that, and then we'll curve them the other way, and then we can solder them together. And let's figure out how far out we went from the outside center point to where it really kind of splits right there. At about, I'm going to call it 39 millimeters. So let's mark it about there. Good trick to get it exactly the same on the other side is just flip this around and line up the center points. Then you can extend it across both of them. Save you having to measure twice. You'll also get them pretty exact that way as well. So first, I think I'm going to bend this relatively sharply inwards this way, and then bend these out relatively sharply, and then I'm going to kind of gently shape them into more of a curve, so it's kind of sinuousy. Sinuousy? Is that a word? I find that if you want to bend these sharply, you can do it 2 ways. You can do it if you have a sharp edge on your table. You can just line that up, hold it sideways like that, and just kind of do that. Now it's going to try and twist on you a little bit because you're trying to bend it against the way that it's easy to bend, which is the thinner dimension, and so it's not going to love you for that, and it's going to try and do some weird things. If it does, you can always correct it as you go. But I'm going to bend that a little bit more like that. This is the other way you can do it. Just grab it, hold it down with your flat nose pliers. If you keep it held down flat, it twists less. Either way, we need to get them pretty close. And I think they're going to come back together right around there. And I want it to be slightly wider than that, so I'm going to go with the steeper one. Let's bend this one just a skosh more. See if we have to match a little closer to that one. That's pretty close. So now when we bend these back the other way, that'll be just a little bit wider. So let's do that next. Again, same deal. I usually hold it with the pliers and push on the table with my hands like that. So, or pull in this case. We're trying to get these two parallel. So if you really want to, you can do it like this too. You can get kind of see how close you are to that. I think bend this one just slightly more. That's pretty close. So now let's see if we can make sure it sits flat on the table again. That's not bad. So let's do this second one. That's pretty close. Okay, so now Sometimes I do this with my, if I can find them. I use these bail making pliers. If I hold it kind of vertically like that, I can kind of manually curve it like that. That gives it a little bit more of a curve to it. Let's see if we can kind of duplicate that. I think I'm going to call that close enough to solder together anyway. So I'm going to make sure they're nice and flat, and then we'll solder these together along the ends here. I haven't been to my channel before. I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, and I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle. And my torch is a Silversmith model. It's for acetylene air model, and it has little holes in the side here that draw in atmospheric air to mix with the gas in the chamber there. And it produces a hotter flame than propane, but not as hot as oxyacetylene, so it's kind of perfect for silver. I like acetylene air torches. So I'm not, Smith is not a sponsor of me, but I would certainly take a sponsorship from them because I really like their product. This is probably going to be more of an intermediate sort of project. However, tough bracelets I think can be made by beginners as long as they have a hot enough torch. And one of the things, if you have one that's on the verge of not being hot enough, since you have to heat the entire piece of silver in order to get the solder to flow very well on silver, when it's all spread out like this in quite a bit of mass, it's going to be hard to get the entire piece up to temperature, because when you're over here, it's cooling off over here, and when over here, it's cooling off over here. So going up and down the length of it along this axis usually works best if you kind of just really let it soak in that heat. The trick is get it almost to the soldering temperature, and then focus in that side to bump up that part of it up just a little bit more. So we'll heat the whole thing again for a bit. And then we'll focus over here and get this bumped up over the 1450 degrees Fahrenheit that it takes to fill hard silver sheet solder. See, there was a little bit of gap between them, and so I nudged it over there to make sure that they were in contact, and once that happens, it flows down that entire length, so it's kind of nice how it does that. A little bit longer than I drew it out, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and round them, and then we can always cut them off and round them again if it seems too long. Leave our options open a little bit here. So let's make a bezel now. So this is that 4.76 millimeter bezel. I'll file it a lot shorter when I get to the point where it's time to set the stones. Now we're getting close, so let's get that tied up against there as best we can. I think it would be fun to mine Tourmaline sometime, you know, not in a serious way, but in a hobby sort of way. I know there's a place near San Diego where you can go to a fee dig area. That might be kind of fun. I brought my dog down today, and she's over on a chair in the corner over there, and she's sacked. Okay, I'm just going to reshape this now. You can do this however works best for you. You know, these things are pretty good for it sometimes. At least getting the corners pushed out. I didn't have one of these for years. I didn't realize how useful they were. They're called bail making pliers if you've never seen them before. There's different kinds too. I'll show you the original one that I have. This was the original one that I have. It's a little better quality than this one, but it's only got the two sides. But they're nice for rounding things out sometimes. You can also use a jump ring mandrel or a bezel mandrel or whatever you have on hand, or just your pliers. No, we're just about right on size. I think that's good. So you don't want to see a lot of space around the stone, and it's pretty good here. So now we need to make a little step for the bottom of that. And so I'm going to use a piece of 18 gauge. I like doing them kind of like this, where it overlaps that way. That way you can kind of size it up or down based on eyeballing it like that. You know, just kind of looking at it over the top like that. That's actually pretty close. So if I cut it just a tiny bit longer than where they meet here, I can put them together, see how close we are, and then snip out a little piece and get it almost perfect usually. I hit it right on the nose that time. That's unusual. Usually it takes me a couple of tries. Alright, so the easiest way to solder these on is just to take a couple of pieces of solder. Maybe 2 or 3. Let me see if I got an extra one over here. And we'll flux this and set it right on top of those and heat it from the outside, and it'll just draw the solder right up on the inside. So there's our bezel. Now let's make one of those little mushroom sort of things. This is a piece of 6 gauge Patron, which was what, 4.1 millimeters, I think. So let's, I'm just going to take it and I'm going to round the end. It's already got a kind of a beveled cut off of there. I should probably file that off. So I've got it kind of gradually tapered down towards the end a little bit, as well as tapered inwards from either side. I'm not sure what kind of mushrooms these look like. I'm not a mushroom expert, but maybe morels. For some reason that seems to ring a bell in my head. I never was much of a mushroom person when I was a kid. I like mushrooms okay now. Not a lot of them, but you know, portobellos are pretty good sometimes. And I certainly use mushroom soup in casseroles and stuff. Oops. These are small enough to where they're kind of hard to hold on to, so I'm using these little nylon jawed pliers that one of my students from a long time ago left me. If I was smart, I'd get myself a couple of new pairs of these of different sorts. Probably should. Okay, so now you can see it's kind of like the front end of an airplane. Alright, so I'm going to find some 14 gauge round now. I'm going to file this in flat. So let's get these both fluxed. Pick up some of this solder here. See how it just kind of adheres right on there. Then let's bring this over here where I can see it. Put these two together. That's about where I want it. Alright, so let's add a little texture to this. I find that just the edge of my chasing hammer here can make for a nice texture. I use it quite a bit. So if you pull it like this, I'm going to do a little bit of creative flattening on this. Maybe do a little twisting of it. Okay, so we got a little twist to it now to give it some light catching ability maybe. Now, let's make this little section here. That's going to go from here over to here. So I'm going to find that 10 gauge I had, which is right here. And I need a piece. I can probably attach the 14 right about over here. So let's do this. Cut a piece about that long. I definitely don't need it that long. I want it to flare out on the bottom a little bit. So let's flatten that end. Maybe dip inwards a little bit here and here. It's doing its thing where it's trying to twist on me a little bit because I'm trying to bend it in a way it doesn't want to go. Let's fish out the actual bracelet. One thing I wanted to do, I'm going to continue doing this in a second, but I do want to mark about where I want these bezels to go for these two side ones. I think about like that, probably. So right there, and right there. So I want them to sit inwards a little bit on it, and so I think I'm going to take my round nose file, or excuse me, my half round file, and create a little bit of a dip in there for them to sit in. I think I'm going to put them in a little bit deeper. I drew the stones to the size of the stone rather than the bezel this time. I should have been thinking, but I'm going to take them in a little bit deeper. Okay, I did a little bit of shaping to get that to fit in there, and I've kind of got it lined up how I want. So originally I was going to make this whole piece separate and then solder it on, but I think I'm going to piece it together, honestly. I think that'll be easier. So I always try to remind people that one of the most important things about soldering is that you need to keep keep track of where all the mass in the piece is, because the bigger parts of it require longer to heat up to the soldering temperature, and if you don't get both the big piece and the little piece up to the soldering temperature, it won't really form a good bond, and it'll tend to break off. So while it's easy to get this little bezel up to the 1450 degrees just by casually passing over it, it takes a while to get this big chunk of metal here up to that temperature, and you want them to reach temperature at about the same time so that this doesn't melt before this reaches it. So, okay, we need to add some little pieces in too. So I need a little piece of 14 gauge stemming off right there. I'm going to about right there. And then off of that, we'll need a piece going way over there like that. I was thinking about this the other day. It's kind of interesting because sometimes I'll make a curve on something in it and I'm like, oh, that's pleasing, that looks nice. And other times, when I look at it, I'm like, no, it doesn't look as nice. You know, we better put this other bezel in this one before we do this next step. So I'm going to file a notch right kind of on the inside of this like we did before and solder that in. Be ready. Let's try it like that. And then we can shape it a little bit after we get this one soldered on right there. So. Somebody in the corner is getting impatient over here. You're just going to have to wait a minute, sweetie. Okay. We got that one on. Let's keep adding mushroom heads here. Okay, I'm back and I've added a few more of these mushrooms. Got this one coming here, that one there. This one hooks here and here, so I'll kind of overlap those. I have a bunch of solder cut and I just threw it on the pad and I kind of got it in the wrong spot here. Okay, so let's solder those on. Okay, I think I got them all. If I need to, after I pickle this, I may, try and retexture these a little bit, even after I polish, because sometimes that'll take some of the texture out of there. Everything always looks crummy at this stage, so once we pickle for a while, I think we'll get a better feel for what it's going to look like. Okay, I set the two side ones, and I do this a little differently than many people. I use the flat side of my chain nose pliers as a kind of a bezel pusher. And then I'll use the rounded part as a burnisher. One thing to note, I did go back and retexture these a little bit because polishing pretty much eradicated the previous texture on there. That's kind of what I was shooting for. Something sort of viney looking. Just get a little bit of playful curviness in there. So we'll get some better pictures of that after I finish up the tops of the bezels, and we'll call it good. So tell me what you think. Tell me what you would have done different. I'd like to hear those kinds of things. So I thought about using different colored tourmalines, but I went with greens. And there are some variations in the shades just a little bit. This one's a little more olive than these two. And that's okay. I think that's kind of fun. So, all right. Well, I'll get that finished up for pictures. All right. Well, that was the Art Nouveau sort of cuff bracelet with the 3 tourmalines. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And I'd love it if you take a moment and check out my main channel page. I have lots of content over there. I started doing this maybe 3 years and 3 months ago or something like that, I think. But I do 3 videos per week, so there's a lot of content. It adds up to about 480 some videos now. There's lots of projects. There's some techniques, there's some various things I'm kind of experimenting with. There's lots of stuff about tools and gemstones even. So check out some of those videos and make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. So the other thing is, make sure to hit the video description down below. There's a link to my merch store, and I just put up some different things. We put 3 new mugs up there with different designs. And there's a couple of magnets that say support artists, and let's see, there's even a cool t-shirt there as well. So and of course my my sketchbooks where you can draw out your ideas. Those are always really handy, so get yourself some of that stuff. It's a great way to support my channel. There's also a link to my ebook, which is another great way to support my channel. It includes information about all of the tutorials from last year. It's a great guide because it's got extra information, pictures, materials lists, stuff like that, as well as a link right to the videos. And there's about 170 videos last year, a few more than that, I think. And finally, there's a link to my Patreon if you want to get to know a little bit more about that community over there and how to sign up for that. There's multiple tiers over there. The lowest one being you get my videos without the YouTube advertising, which is probably kind of less annoying, so that's the lowest tier. But the other tiers include access to other content and things like that. So check those out, and I'd love to have you over there as well. So thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.